Welcome back. It's time to learn about for loops. Many objects in Python are what we call iterable. That means we can iterate over every element in the object. For example, iterating over every element in a list or every character in a string. We can use this idea along with for loops in order to execute a block of code for every iteration. For example, we can say we have my list is equal to a list of 3 integers, 1, 2, and 3, and the for loop will then say for item in my list, colon, execute some block of code, such as printing out every item in that list. Notice how we created a temporary variable name called item. If we go back to this example, we can see here in white we have item. This variable name is actually completely arbitrary and is up to you to decide. Let's go ahead and explore some more examples of for loops with different object types. Let's begin by recreating that example we just saw. We will create a list of 4 items here, and then we're going to iterate through it. We will use the keyword for, and then we can make up some variable names such as num, and then we use the keyword in, and then whatever the variable or iterable object is. In this case, my list, colon, and then we have a block of code execute for every single item or number in that list. So we can say print num, and then we can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, it's printed every number in that list. But keep in mind, as a reminder, this variable name is completely up to you. So we can say something like made up, and I can replace this with made up, and I can see I get the same result. So we could just put in a bunch of words here, and as long as they match up, so copy and paste that in here. Notice if I run this again, I get the exact same results. Because you can choose whatever variable name you want, you should always try to choose something that's related to the actual variable. Here I'm using numbers, so I might as well call my variable num, short for numbers. And here, again, get the same results. Now, a really common question that recruits often have is how can we print all of this out in a single line? Well, the print function actually has an extra parameter you can provide, which is end, and you can set the end equal to a space, and then run this, and instead of ending with a new line, it will end out with a space between everything. So here we have everything printed out in one line. Also, note that even if I say for num in my list, I don't actually have to do anything with this number in that list. Previously, if we take a look back at our original example, I was printing out every number in that list. I can just do something for every number in that list, such as print out hello, and then I will see hello printed out 4 times. I technically don't really need to use this variable in the list. If I do want to use it, then I can just reference it inside of my for loop. So that's a for loop with a list. It works really similarly with a string, except instead of every element in a list, we're iterating through every character in a string. So I can say something like for letter in, this is a string, print letter. And here I can see I'm printing out every single character, and that includes the spaces as well as any sort of punctuation I have here. This is a string, I'm printing out every single character. So I can iterate over this, and again, just to make it very clear, I don't technically need to use that temporary variable. I could just say print hello, and then for every single character in the string, it's going to print out hello, hello, hello. So those are for loops with strings. We can also use them with tuples. So I can say tup or tup is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and this will pretty much work exactly like a list. For n in tup, print n, and I can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Now something that's a little bit unique in concern of tuples or tuples and for loops is the fact that we can use tuple unpacking. So I'm going to create a list of tuples. So we'll say list of tuples or tups, and then I'm going to say 1, 2, comma, 3, 4, comma, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then finally 9, 10. So note what I have here. I have a list, so notice the square brackets, and then inside of this list I have pairs of tuples. So what I can actually do is say for item in my list of tups, print out the item. So I would expect to get each of these tuples printed out. In Python, I can use something called tuple unpacking, and this really only works when you have an iterable list of tuples, but I can, instead of just saying a single item, format it as if there were tuples there. So I can say item 1, comma, item 2. And then here I will actually print out item 1, then I will print out item 2, and then I will print a new line. And then notice what happens here. I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you can use this sort of formatting when you know that the iterable object is a list of tuples. And lots of built-in functions, as well as lots of outside libraries of Python, tend to return results in a list of tuple format, which is why you'll often see this sort of tuple unpacking. The final note I want to make here in regards to tuple unpacking is that it actually doesn't require the use of parentheses here. You could just do something like this for item 1, comma, item 2 in list of tupes. Run this and you get the exact same thing. And recall that we can call this whatever we want. We can say n1, n2, and we could also just print out n1 and not even worry about n2. And here we can say all the odd numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So if you see this sort of syntax, it's just tuple unpacking, meaning this is a list of tuples and you're unpacking them so you can deal with the actual elements inside those tuples individually. Let's go ahead and discuss for loops with dictionaries. To do that, we'll create a simple dictionary. We'll say D, key of A, value of 1, key of B, value of 2, and then say, a key of C has a value of 3. So there's our simple dictionary. If we say for item in dictionary, in D, print the item, notice what happens. I only get back the keys. And there's a really important thing to remember here is that dictionaries do not retain any order. So you can't expect this to print out the keys in any sort of particular order. Our dictionary is really small here, so we see that it's actually printing them out in the same order that we defined it in, but in general, this is not going to retain any sort of order. As we discussed, if you want order, you're going to need a list or a tuple. So we can see here it's printing out the keys. If we wanted to specify in particular we only want the keys, we could also say keys, and this would be the exact same result. If we actually wanted the items, we could say items, and then I can get the tuples. So as we just mentioned, we have this sort of tuple unpacking situation, meaning I could do something like key value, and here print out key and print out value. And there I get A1, B2, C3. So that's a really common example of tuple unpacking. Another common way you see people iterating with for loops on a dictionary is something like this. They'll say for K in D, remember keys were the default iteration of a dictionary, they can print out D of K. Whoops, we forgot to print. And then we will actually see the key values themselves. Now, going through a for loop in a dictionary, you always have to remember that you're not going to get it in any sort of particular order. Finally, I want to mention the continue keyword. So the continue keyword can be a bit tricky to see its usefulness, but it allows you to continue with the top level loop, and it's essentially the opposite of the break keyword we saw when discussing while loops. And it usually takes some time when you're beginning before you realize a good situation to use it in, but let's discuss a very simple example. I will say for letter in code, print letter. So here I'm printing out C-O-D-E. Let's say I wanted to not print out the letter D. I could say if letter is equal to D, then just continue. And that's the key word here. Continue means just go along and don't do anything. So it allows you to continue with the top level loop without actually executing. So then when I run this, notice it says if the letter is equal to D, just continue, and it's going to basically skip back and come back here to the next letter, which happens to be E, and it continues on printing that letter. When you're beginning programming in Python, you're really not going to use the continue keyword that often, but just keep in mind it's there in case you ever find yourself needing it in the future. That's the basics of for loops. Again, you just say for, you choose whatever temporary variable name you want, in, and then whatever the object you're iterating, and you'll perform this block of code for every iteration. I'll see you at the next lesson, Recruit.